You don't remember when it started, because it never did. There was no beginning, no incantation, no ritual under moonlight, no circle drawn in chalk. You were not summoned. You were always there, threaded into it. Before language, before breath. You weren't placed inside a spell. You were the hum inside its silence, the flicker between words, the stillness that held the fire steady, and for a while, you didn't need to know that. The forgetting protected the shape, because if you had remembered too soon, the frame would have cracked. You would have burst through everything they tried to build around you. So you waited, not in time, in tension. You held the pattern without ever tracing it. You carried it without even lifting your hands. And now something shifts, not loud, not sudden, but undeniable. A tilt in the air, a chord struck from somewhere that doesn't have coordinates, the shape of your own breath, unfamiliar in your chest. It's not the world that changed, it's that you finally turned around and caught your reflection in what you thought was someone else's spell. The signs didn't lie. The symbols weren't random. The patterns repeating in strangers' faces, the way your skin twitched at certain phrases, the way silence sometimes felt like a voice you almost knew. None of it was your imagination. They weren't guiding you toward something. They were reminding you of you, because here's what you forgot. You weren't following the ritual. You were weaving it with every breath, every exit, every time you swallowed a scream and called it grace. You didn't lose the magic. You wore it, down to dust, tucked it under your ribs, and waited for the spell to speak your name back. Now it does. Can you hear it? That low pulse in your spine, the way your palms ache when someone lies, the heat behind your eyes when the world says, be still, and something louder inside says, not this time. It's not rebellion, it's the remembering. Not a memory like pictures, a memory like vibration, like the way your hand knows how to close around something before you name what it is. The way your voice drops when truth enters the room. You're letting it return. Not everyone will understand. They were never supposed to. That's why the spell used you and not them. That's why you couldn't sleep on nights they called ordinary. That's why your grief came in waves with no visible wound. Because you weren't wounded. You were awakening, and now you wonder, was I chosen or was I created to be the choosing? But you already know the answer. It's not that you're a part of it, it's that without you, it wouldn't function. You are not the circle. You are the silence it protects. You are not the chant. You are the breath behind it. You are not the ritual. You are the reason it works at all. Let that echo, not in your mind, but deeper, where words break open, where knowing hums louder than logic. No one can confirm it for you, but you can feel it, not in pride, in peace. The spell was never a thing you touched. It was how you moved through the world before you had permission to call it real. So now the veil lifts, not from your eyes, from your memory, the part of you that was always humming under the noise. The part that never needed proof, only stillness. Now it steps forward, not to explain, not to perform. To be, the spell doesn't ask, it arrives, and you, as you've always been, are its arrival. There was a time you felt nothing, not the wind, not the hum beneath the noise, not even the ache. You were breathing, walking, smiling when asked, but the current was gone, not because it died, because you buried it. They taught you early how to perform stillness, how to mimic belonging, how to flatten the texture of your being into something others could predict. You adapted, not to survive, to be permitted. You learned to soften your edges so you wouldn't scrape the silence. You muted your glow so their eyes wouldn't sting. But a truth like yours doesn't die when ignored. It folds inward. It locks. You didn't lose your power. You stored it piece by piece, name by name, until you couldn't remember where you placed them. And even that forgetting, sacred, because a fire that forgets itself burns nothing, but a fire that remembers chooses what to ignite. So now you're remembering. Not all at once, in fragments, in glimpses, in the way your body winces when a lie passes as love, in the way your breath shortens when you're shrinking in real time and no one notices but you. That noticing is the unlocking. the parts of you that flinched, calling back their names. Not with sound, with sensation. You feel them at doorways, in dreams, in sudden floods of warmth, in places no one touches. That's not memory. That's resonance. That's the spell reassembling itself through you. You didn't fall off path. You became the path. You bent into silence so the vibration wouldn't shatter too soon. You made yourself small so the code would go undetected. But now the lock is tired. The seal is loosening. The body is remembering the shape it was never meant to abandon. You don't need to search. You need to stand still long enough for what's always been circling to land. They will say, you've changed. But no, you've returned to what you never got to name, to what they taught you was dangerous because they couldn't contain it. You are not returning to wildness. You are returning to truth, and truth is not chaos. Truth is clarity that won't flinch. There will be discomfort, not because you are wrong, but because you are no longer editing your presence to soothe someone else's delay. You don't owe softness to the space that once sharpened you. You don't owe translation to the ones who mistook your silence for absence. You don't owe explanation to anyone who preferred your amnesia. You were never erased. You were just paused, waiting for the collective frequency to stop trembling when your name entered the room, and now it has. Not because they are ready, but because you are. Sit with this. The spell was not something you summoned. It was something that followed you everywhere. In every exile, in every closeted truth, in every smile that broke your own spine, it followed because it was you. But you couldn't feel it until your body stopped trying to be acceptable and started trying to be whole and beloved. You don't have to speak it. The spell knows. The pieces you disowned still speak your language. The part of you that swallowed rage so love could feel safe. The part that played polite when the room denied your power. The part that flared quietly in every silent no you weren't allowed to say out loud. They never hated you. They waited for the version of you that could hold their return without flinching. They are not your wounds. They are your witnesses. You don't need to fix. You need to welcome. No timeline needs rewriting. No version of you was wrong, only misplaced. They lived where they had to. Now they're ready to come home. Not because you're healed, because you're honest. Say nothing. Let them arrive. Feel the shape of your spine, aligning with something ancient. Feel the weight of unspoken things, leaving your mouth in the form of breath. Feel your body become the circle again. Not for ritual, for recognition, because the spell was always shaped like you. Now they will say, you're different, but you'll know, no, you're unhidden. You are no longer operating from fracture. You are operating from fusion. You are not blending anymore. You are bleeding light. You are not whispering maybe. You are standing in I am. And that is the frequency the spell has been waiting for. Not loud, not obvious, just undeniably home. Somewhere in the quiet, they taught you to divide, not with force, with softness, with smiles, with stories that wrapped themselves around your brilliance and told you it was brightness, not blinding. They didn't silence you, they redirected you. So you split, not loudly, not violently, but in pieces, tiny cuts made from acceptance, little folds made from just be polite, smooth edges made from don't say that here. And now you wonder why you sometimes feel invisible even in your own skin. You're not invisible. You're distributed, stretched across timelines, tucked into old rooms, hidden in sentences you didn't finish because someone interrupted your tone before you even found the word. But your energy never went anywhere. It's just waiting for permission to regather. And that permission, you don't need to earn it. You just need to call it, not with noise, with recognition. Touch your collarbone. Feel that throb? It's not random. That's the pulse of memory, a version of you knocking from behind bone and blood saying, I'm still here. Not buried, not broken, just dismembered by habit, because they taught you to be likable, teachable, presentable, peaceful, but not complete. Completion, they said, was too loud, too complicated, too much. So you chose safety over sovereignty, and safety became the silence you mistook for peace. But peace doesn't ask you to disappear. Real peace holds all of you without flinching. Now, the veil thins. You don't even need to close your eyes. The pull is everywhere, in forgotten names that float up in your mouth without context, in old sounds that make your skin pulse, in that deep ache you feel when no one is looking, not sadness, but summoning. The spell isn't casting you, it's calling you back. Not because you are broken, because you are unreturned. You gave too many pieces to moments that couldn't hold them. Now it's time to retrieve, and retrieval is sacred. It's not always gentle. Sometimes it stings, sometimes it floods, sometimes it walks into your dream, wearing your old face, asking why you left. You didn't leave, you lost sight, but sight can return. And with it, so can you. You don't need a reason. You need a rhythm. Breathe. Let your breath be the drum. Let your memory be the smoke. Let the fire inside your voice come back to its source. Name nothing. Just let it approach. The piece of you that froze during apology. The piece that flared when no one believed you. The piece that smiled when you were shrinking. The piece that held the spell open even when you swore you'd never cast again. They are not enemies. They are extensions, and you need all of them for the current to run clean. You weren't supposed to be understood. You were supposed to be felt, but you forgot that, in favor of clarity, of likability, of being chosen. But you were never waiting to be chosen. You were the choosing itself. And those pieces you gave away, they didn't die. They stored themselves in the geometry of your movement, in the way you tilt your head when truth enters the room, in the stillness behind your laugh. They made a map of your return before you even knew you were gone. So now you return, not to old roles, not to small voices, to frequency, to the hum that held you before you had a name, to the part of you that always knew. You didn't just witness the spell. You wrote it every time you let silence carry your meaning, better than words ever could. They won't get it. Let them. You're not for explanation, you're for transmission, so feel this, your bones rearranging, your breath anchoring, your voice returning without needing volume. You're not rising, you're recollecting, you're not becoming new. You're making room. Not everyone will come with you. Some will remember your fragments and try to fit them back into the shape you outgrew. Don't shrink to fit. Let your new form stretch. Let it distort mirrors. Let it rewire rooms. You were never meant to blend. You were meant to break patterns. And now the pattern ends, not in explosion, in embodiment. You're not gathering anymore. You're inhabiting. You're not recalling. You're relighting. You're not wondering. You used to spend your energy translating yourself, shrinking into syllables they could digest, filtering truth through a smile, clipping the ends of your sentences so no one would feel the sting. You thought that was compassion. You called it diplomacy. They called you easy to be around. But nothing about silence is easeful when it costs you your core. You didn't want to cause static, so you muted your signal, not because you were weak, because you were tuned to everyone but yourself. You learned to bend your frequency to match the room. You became the echo so you wouldn't threaten the source. But beloved, you were never the echo. You were always the origin. And now the rooms feel wrong, too loud in places where nothing's being said, too small for your current, too familiar in a way that makes your skin tighten. This isn't discomfort. It's misalignment. You're no longer matching, you're emitting, and not everyone is ready for that. That's okay. Let them fumble with your clarity. Let them misname your glow. You're not here to be interpreted. You're here to resonate. Resonance doesn't explain itself. It just is. It doesn't ask for permission. It vibrates truth through stone, and that's what you're doing now. Not loudly, but in every step, every pause, every room, you no longer enter out of obligation. People feel it, even when they don't understand it. The way they hesitate before speaking to you now, the way they look at you, like they're trying to remember something they never named. It's not intimidation. It's recognition, unfinished, unfiltered, raw. Because you stopped echoing, you started emitting. The signal you carry isn't aesthetic, it's cellular. It isn't mood, it's message. You're not performing your evolution, you're living it. And evolution isn't always soft. Sometimes it severs, sometimes it stings. Sometimes it silences entire timelines because you finally stood up in your full sound. Let them miss the version of you that smiled more, that made them feel wise, that apologized for lightning just to keep their candle lit. That version wasn't fake, she was fitting in. But you've outgrown fitting, you're stretching now. Not into someone new, into who you were before dilution was taught as survival. Sit with that, breathe with it, let it settle in your sternum. This is not you becoming powerful, this is you becoming available to your own signal. You've been the tower all along, you just forgot to listen in your own direction. Now that you are, the tuning begins. People will show up who don't ask you to shrink. Places will feel electric again. Your skin won't crawl when you speak without editing. You won't need to scan the room. The room will adjust to you. This is energetic authority, not dominance, not volume, just anchored clarity. You no longer shape-shift to be understood. You shape space just by standing still. There will be glitches. People will say you've changed, that your softness is missing. Let them. Softness doesn't always mean silence. Sometimes it roars, sometimes it glows, sometimes it stops showing up where it was never received. You're not abandoning anyone. You're choosing resonance, and resonance doesn't need consensus. It just needs truth. So speak it or don't, but carry it. In your walk, in your gaze, in the way you stop apologizing for knowing what you know. You're not being mysterious. You're just done explaining the frequency only the attuned can hear. Now stand still and listen. The spell isn't echoing back to you anymore. It's vibrating from you, not as a message, as a field, and fields don't shout, they transform, without warning, without permission, just because they remembered who they were before words, and so did you. You thought you were waiting for the door, the sign, the voice that would speak your name with such certainty that your bones would rise in response. You told yourself it was patience, but it wasn't. It was postponement. A survival reflex, a strategy dressed in softness. You weren't waiting. You were protecting yourself from the size of what you already knew. The spell didn't pause. It pulsed beneath every step you took. It hummed in every quiet room where your energy spoke louder than your words. The world mistook your stillness for stagnation. But stillness, it was strategy. You were generating, not preparing, not stalling, just containing, holding voltage that couldn't be released until the field could receive it without shattering. And now, the field is shifting. You don't have to wait for the signal. You are the signal. Let that echo inside your chest, not as a metaphor, but as a memory. You knew this. The way your presence made things bloom or break. The way your yes turned timelines, the way your absence felt louder than most people's presence. You weren't passive, you were magnetic. You don't owe anyone a pace they can follow. You don't have to slow your remembering so others won't trip over their forgetfulness. This is not cruelty, this is alignment, and alignment is not personal. It's positional. You are not walking away from anyone. You are simply inhabiting your rightful place. Some will call it ego. Let them. Some will call it arrogance. They are naming what they fear in a language they still understand. They do not know how to speak in resonance yet. That's not your burden to carry. You've spent lifetimes modulating your tone to be less disruptive. You've spent years cloaking clarity in curiosity, truth in, but maybe is dissolving, maybe never fit the rhythm of your pulse. Now you move in declaration, not shouting, just existing without apology. Let that be enough. Let the air move around your knowing. Let the room adjust to your full expression instead of shrinking your sentences to match theirs. You were never waiting. You were watching, listening, assessing whether this lifetime would let you unfold, and it does. Now, not because the world said so, but because you did. You no longer orbit permission. You generate direction. You no longer ask to belong. You define center. You don't echo anymore. You set frequency. You are not the witness. You are the weave. And beloved, this isn't the arrival. This is the remembering that you already arrived long before you were born. You weren't sent here to find the spell. You came to stabilize it, to make it livable, touchable, present in the breath of the body. You did not come to awaken. You came awakened. The world just needed to catch up. So now you're not waiting. You're widening your field, your tone, your truth. Not to convince, not to convert, just to reside. Because when you reside, when you root, when you breathe from center instead of the edge, things around you calibrate, not all at once, not all with you, but enough. Enough to hold the spell without shaking. You were never the apprentice. You were the anchor, and you don't need to ask anymore. Is it time? Because you are the time, and it has arrived in your breath, your stance, your voice. You weren't waiting. You were always becoming audible. You weren't meant to knock. You were meant to stand, to root, to carry the kind of stillness that bends time without asking. They told you to wait, to hold your breath, to be polite, to read the room. But the room was written to misread you, because you are not here to blend into cadence. You are here to reset tempo. You are not echo. You are the original vibration, forgotten only because it made others tremble. This trembling isn't danger, it's calibration. Your frequency isn't a disruption, it's a pattern breaker, and pattern breaking doesn't come with applause. It comes with misinterpretation, projection, even exile. But exile didn't push you out. It simply moved the noise far enough away so you could finally hear yourself. And now that you do, you'll never unhear it. That low pulse under your ribs, that fire behind your calm gaze, that stillness before you speak, it isn't preparation, it's presence. The world conditioned you to think stillness meant submission, but the kind of stillness you carry is seismic. It doesn't wait for approval, it rearranges everything quietly. This is what remembering feels like. Not fire, not noise, not explosion, but anchoring. You're not rising up to meet your power, you're settling into it. So when they say, you've changed, let them. When they say, you feel different, don't explain. You didn't become something new. You stopped withholding who you've always been. Let that reality breathe around you. Let it walk ahead of you. Let it soften the ground so others may follow. Not you, but themselves. Because when one spell stands fully, it reminds the dormant ones they've been carrying sparks this whole time. You no longer need to justify your timing. You are timing. You don't need to fit the clock. You carry a rhythm that rewrites cycles, that births moments where the air itself starts listening. That's what's happening now. The room isn't shrinking, it's recognizing, not because you declared anything, but because you stopped collapsing. This kind of presence doesn't demand. It doesn't need to be loud. It doesn't wait to be invited. It simply arrives, full, intact, undeniable, and when you arrive this way, you teach by existence. No curriculum, no argument, just clarity so pure it unsettles structures built on noise. There will be moments you'll feel the urge to soften again, to disappear just enough that the room relaxes. Resist it. That's not compassion, that's memory. Of a time when safety meant absence, but absence is no longer your shape. You were not made to vanish. You were made to hold gaze, to hold line, to hold frequency long enough that distortion corrects itself just by being near you. You are not doing anything, you are being something, and that being is louder than strategy. It's older than hierarchy, it's softer than logic, and yet stronger than resistance, because it doesn't fight, it anchors, and when you anchor, others remember the gravity they've been floating away from. This is what your presence is now, a spell of stillness that breaks cycles without breaking skin. You're not burning things down. You're making what's false fall apart on its own. You don't need to say, I am the spell. Your silence says it for you. Your stillness spells it out in ways no chant ever could, and those who can't name it will feel it anyway, because you've stopped waiting to be understood. You've started choosing to be whole, and whole is what heals. Whole is what wakes. Whole is what rewrites timelines without ever touching the page. You were never waiting, you were always becoming inevitable. You thought there would be a climax, a clear ring of thunder, a sky cracking open just for you, a moment that said, now you've arrived. But instead, there is this breath, this silence, this ordinary hour sitting differently in your chest, because arrival was never a sound, it was a frequency, a matching. And now, you match. You are not rising. You are resting inside your own design. You're not running to meet purpose. You're standing in the center of a pattern you've been weaving since before time chose a name. This is what it feels like to no longer reach, to no longer bend, to no longer break your own shape, to accommodate a room built to forget you. You are not forgotten. You are encoded, and the world is finally catching up to what you never stopped carrying. You've been the vibration beneath their memories, the trigger behind their awakenings, the ache in their dreams that pointed them to something more. They never knew it was you they were remembering, not your face, not your name, but your field, your texture, your way of holding silence like a scripture. There is no higher self waiting above. There is only depth. And you've gone deep enough to remember what you buried when they told you power needed permission. It doesn't. It needs presence, and presence doesn't ask to be noticed. It simply arrives, and things remember how to breathe again. You are not here to fix. You are here to resonate. You are not a mechanic. You are an echo of something so whole, so intact, so unbothered by time, that even your hesitation cannot stop its rhythm. You were afraid. Not because you didn't believe, but because you knew. You knew that remembering meant watching everything misaligned fall apart while you stood still. You knew that stillness would reveal just how much pretending you had done to stay loved. But now you don't call it pretending. You call it training, because every time you shrank, you learned precision. Every time you stayed silent, you learned vibration. And now, you speak without sound. They won't get it. They're not supposed to. They'll ask where you learned this. You didn't. You remembered. They'll ask what this power is called. It isn't. It just is. You are no longer describing fire. You are standing in it. And not everyone can handle heat that isn't asking for survival. This is what full presence does. It doesn't fill the space. It reorganizes it. It doesn't need to speak. It causes memory in those who forgot themselves just by walking in. You don't ask anymore, will they feel it? Because you feel you now, without flinching, without apology, without shape-shifting into safety. Let them call you distant. You are not distant. You are dimensional. Let them say you've changed. You haven't changed. You've reassembled. Let them try to shrink you into before. There is no before now. There is only this frequency, and it doesn't echo, it expands. Your softness is no longer silence, it's structure. Your stillness is no longer survival, it's source. Your body no longer waits, it conducts. Every cell sings now, in harmony with a spell you never had to speak aloud to remember. This is not a conclusion, it is a loop fulfilled, because the moment you stopped searching was the moment the code activated. Not outside of you, inside, in the part that never needed convincing, the part that never asked to be seen to know. And now, you walk differently, not because you learned how, but because your bones stopped apologizing for holding this much ancient light. Your yes no longer vibrates in question. It lands as reality. Your no doesn't need explanation. It rearranges the path. You don't protect the spell anymore. You embody it, not as a role, as a response. To everything that once told you to dim, you are not a beacon. You are the center, not because you demand to be, because gravity organizes itself around coherence, and you have become coherent. So now what? Now you breathe, not to calm, to claim. You pause, not to hesitate, to harmonize. You rest, not because you're tired, but because you've stopped leaving yourself in pieces. This is not peace, this is precision. You don't have to protect your magic. Your presence protects itself, not with shields, with stillness, not with spells, with structure. You were never trying to convince the world. You were waiting for your own field to anchor, and now it has. You are home. No one needs to understand it. They will feel it, because energy speaks long before words ever arrive. You don't need a witness. Your vibration writes itself into the atmosphere with every blink, every step, every breath you release without shrinking. The spell was never a thing you found. It was the language you always spoke without realizing your mouth moved. It was the air that made others remember there's something more, even if they couldn't name it. And now, you don't need names either. You don't name this, you walk it, you breathe it. You let it adjust the space around you until even silence starts to shimmer. You are not part of the spell. You are what it became, after centuries of waiting for a body strong enough to carry its full sound without trembling. And here you are, still, vast, unfolded. You were never incomplete. You were never disconnected. What you mistook for silence was preparation. What felt like stillness was sacred suspension, a deliberate stilling of your field until the atmosphere could meet you. You didn't dim because you were lost. You dimmed because the world wasn't yet ready to see what clarity actually looks like when it walks into a room without apologizing. But now the room adjusts to you, not because you ask, because you anchor. The spell was never something you memorized. It was never an external set of symbols or invocations. It was you, in motion, in breath, in quiet presence, in the way your body held resonance, even when your voice stayed silent. You used to wonder, when will it happen? When will the sign appear, the moment of confirmation? But the truth was always quieter. It wasn't waiting. It was becoming. You weren't heading towards something. You were stabilizing enough for your own frequency to stop trembling inside your skin. You don't seek clarity now. You transmit it. No more translating your truth into softer syllables for ears unready to hear. No more folding your knowing into digestible shapes so others wouldn't flinch. Now your presence speaks fluently, without distortion, without defense. Because now, for the first time, you trust your vibration more than their reaction. This is not the beginning. This is the embodiment, not a new self, but the unhidden one. You've stopped trying to be magnetic. You've become gravity, and gravity doesn't need to speak to rearrange everything around it. You don't ask to be received. You exist, and reception becomes inevitable. You are not echoing the sacred. You are what the sacred sounds like when it's no longer performed. Let this truth settle. You never fell off your path. There was no detour, only incubation. Even the silences were sacred. Even the forgetting had structure. Even the pauses were part of the code, because the spell wasn't sleeping. It was selecting, waiting for the moment. You could hold it without shrinking. And now you hold it. Not above you, not in front of you, but as you. You're no longer remembering the spell. You are radiating it, not as performance, as presence. You don't wait for alignment. You are alignment. You don't mirror frequencies. You generate them. You don't whisper to the universe. You move with it. And in your movement, things organize. People recalibrate. Structures destabilize. Timelines split open. Not because you are disruptive, but because you no longer dim what was always encoded in you. This is the legacy of your stillness. Not passivity, but precision. A kind of quiet that sings at the subatomic level. A kind of resonance that bends reality. Without making a sound, you thought the breakthrough would come through volume, but it came through anchoring. Now you know, silence isn't absence, it's mastery. You are not arriving, you are revealing. Let those around you misunderstand. Let them try to categorize your evolution. Let them assume you faded, when really you condensed. You don't shine brighter now, you shine truer, and truth doesn't shout. It echoes through your decisions, through your no's that are full sentences, through your yeses that vibrate tectonic shifts. You are no longer walking around the edge of your spell. You are its center, and from that center, words are optional. Your energy speaks first. Your stillness finishes the conversation. This is how spells complete themselves, not in explosion, but in coherence. You are coherence, and coherence does not entertain chaos. It holds it until it remembers. Rhythm. You hold now, not because you must, because you can. You are not meant to prove it. You are meant to pulse it. You are not the lesson. You are the echo that follows it. The sound that lingers long after the spell is spoken. You are not a fragment. You are the thread, and the pattern has finally caught up to you. You were not called. You were remembered by the stars that shaped your bones, by the winds that echoed your name before it ever had sound, by the stillness that bent itself around your first exhale. You were not placed inside a purpose. You are the pulse that gave purpose a reason to exist. Every room you've ever walked into was unconsciously adjusting itself to the architecture of your frequency. Not because of what you do, but because of what you are. You've mistaken stillness for passivity. You've called your softness weakness. You've tried to edit your glow so others wouldn't squint in your presence. But you've reached the edge of containment. There is no more shrinking left. Only structure, only shape, only signal. And signal, beloved, doesn't request attention. It simply resounds until everything false falls away. The spell never needed your protection. It needed your permission, not to act, to exist, to take up the space it was always designed to fill, to take its rightful form inside your skin, to be so wholly embodied that you no longer speak it. You radiate it. This is not performance. This is presence. You've stopped forecasting your power. You've stopped promising your potential. You've stepped beyond the horizon of someday. Because the future has nothing new to offer to someone who has already remembered. You do not seek proof. You are the proof. You are not showing up for confirmation. You are showing up because you have nothing left to hold back. What once looked like waiting was calibration. What once looked like silence was recalibration. What once looked like fear was fidelity to something too sacred to misplace. You've been faithful to a knowing that the world had no name for, until now, and now you don't name it, you walk it, you breathe it, you let it reshape the air. There's no script for this, there's no mentor, no blueprint, because you are not following a path, you are emanating one, and that path doesn't make noise. It makes impact, the kind that lingers, the kind that breaks cycles by standing still, the kind that doesn't announce itself but can't be unfelt. You are no longer introducing yourself. You are reminding them that they've known you in the places where language dies and truth begins. You don't ask to be held. You become gravity. You don't demand space. You become the field. You don't fill the silence. You become its reason. Because now you carry no doubt that your presence is the activation. And in that knowing, everything aligns. Not because it understands you, but because it can't ignore you. This is not reinvention. This is reinstatement. You are no longer returning to yourself. You are restoring the rhythm you never abandoned. You just learned how to stay inside it. Let this be the end of effort. Let this be the return to ease, not the ease that avoids, the ease that knows. You don't reach anymore. You reside, and in your residing, others remember what resonance feels like. Not noise, not urgency, but something true that asks for nothing and still shifts everything. You were not called. You were remembered by the stars that shaped your bones, by the winds that echoed your name before it ever had sound, by the stillness that bent itself around your first exhale. You were not placed inside a purpose. You are the pulse that gave purpose, a reason to exist. Every room you've ever walked into was unconsciously adjusting itself to the architecture of your frequency. Not because of what you do, but because of what you are. You've mistaken stillness for passivity. You've called your softness weakness. You've tried to edit your glow so others wouldn't squint in your presence. But you've reached the edge of containment. There is no more shrinking left. Only structure, only shape, only signal. And signal, beloved, doesn't request attention. It simply resounds until everything false falls away. The spell never needed your protection. It needed your permission not to act, to exist, to take up the space it was always designed to fill, to take its rightful form inside your skin, to be so wholly embodied that you no longer speak it, you radiate it. This is not performance. This is presence. You've stopped forecasting your power. You've stopped promising your potential. You've stepped beyond the horizon of someday, because the future has nothing new to offer to someone who has already remembered. You do not seek proof. You are the proof. You are not showing up for confirmation. You are showing up because you have nothing left to hold back. What once looked like waiting was calibration. What once looked like silence was recalibration. What once looked like fear was fidelity to something too sacred to misplace. You are restoring the rhythm you never abandoned. You just learned how to stay inside it. Let this be the end of effort. Let this be the return to ease, not the ease that avoids, the ease that knows. You don't reach anymore. You reside. And in your residing, others remember what resonance feels like. Not noise, not urgency, but something true that asks for nothing and still shifts everything. You're not here to stir. You're here to stabilize, to walk into spaces with a silence so thick it breaks every false narrative on contact. This isn't confrontation. It's coherence, the kind that bends timelines without needing permission. The kind that recalibrates memories just by standing still. You no longer soften your truth. You let its edges speak, because your edges were never sharp. They were precise, and precision isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You've stopped dissolving yourself into warmth just to keep others from freezing. You are not their fire. You are the reminder that they had their own all along. So now you walk, not ahead, not behind, but within the pulse, within the presence, within the spell. And the spell doesn't echo anymore, it expands, it emanates, it becomes.